So I will now start with these RNA viruses and invasion strategies. As you know, we always complain about RNA viruses. It is true that we are mostly troubled by the RNA viruses, but it is also true that we have learned quite a bit from the RNA viruses because just we knew from our childhood days that DNA from DNA RNA is made, and from RNA proteins are made. The transcription and translation DNA, RNA, protein are the central dogma. But now from the RNA viruses, now we started learning that actually, no, it's actually reverse is possible, RNA to DNA by reverse transcription. Not only that, RNA can be a template for making another RNA by by using an enzyme called RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So, and all these things we have actually learned in a hard way. As I said it, we always hate the RNA viruses because it's very notorious and it's difficult to handle. You heard about Ebola. You definitely you heard about our dengue, chikungunya, polio, hepatitis C, and now all of you are actually aware of this SARS-CoV-2. Now, the question is why the RNA viruses are so difficult to handle. So when we try to analyze, we found that the first and the foremost reason is the high mutation rate and lack of proofreading in the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which actually makes copies the viral RNA template. And this is just not that the student is bad. This is not just that the student cannot copy well. It's actually partly because they can't really erase and correct the answers. So just because of the absence of the exonuclease activity, there are low fidelity and there are a lot of mutations accumulates, and that leads to the generations of quasi-species, and that makes the situation even more difficult to handle these viruses. But it is true the error rate is within a limit of mutation tolerability. And the principles, what one can do is to induce forced error by using nucleoside analogs. As you know that ribavirin is being used, and recently you also heard that remdesivir is being tried for COVID-19 as well. So just to induce error, forced error, and then try to see whether we can check the virus replication. Now, while talking about the mutation, if you really look at the mutation rate and in different organisms, starting from, let's say, viroids, then the RNA viruses like an Ebola, then the DNA macrophage, or in the prokaryotes like a rod-shaped bacteria, or in eukaryotes in the rodents, if you see it as you go on, that the highest mutation rate per site, per replication is highest for the RNA viruses. And as you see, the numbers are here. Dengue virus, it is 2.64 into 10 to the power minus 5, as opposed to somewhere in protozoa, in C. elegans, it is 2.1 into 10 to the power minus 8, or even in E. coli, it is 2 into 10 to the power minus 10. Now, this mutation rate within the RNA viruses are also different. Within the viruses also, the mutation rate varies. And as you see here, that the mutation rate is actually highest for the RNA viruses. Again, if you go back and read Charles Darwin, he said that the variability is not actually caused by man. He only unintentionally exposed organic being to new conditions of life. And then nature acts on the organization and cause it to vary. So maybe sometimes we are also contributing to emergence of the drug resistances, and because of this high mutation rate, it ends up with the variations in the antigenic epitopes. And the consequence of variations in the antigenic epitope is actually it will be difficult for detection and also making vaccines. Now, I'll just give you a simple example because my laboratory in the Indian Institute of Science have been working on hepatitis C virus for the last 22 years. So what we have found, the hepatitis C has 7 genotypes, but more than 64 subtypes. And there are so many quasi-species that makes it very difficult to make a vaccine. partly because it doesn't have any animal model to test it, and partly there are other reasons for making the vaccines is difficult. But nonetheless, we gave it a try that is it possible that we can make a vaccine which will be customized for the Indian population. How it is so? Because in India, we know that genotype 3A is more common. So is it possible at least we can, as an exemplary, can just make a vaccine candidate using a virus-like protein particle or VLP, virus-like particle, which we made it with the genotype 3A structural proteins code U1A2. And we showed that this VLP actually was able to elicit sufficient immunogenicity or immune response in mice, and those serum when collected from immunized mice serum could successfully neutralize the virus or in the liver cells. Now, this is one way to handle the humoral immunity, but people talks that in hepatitis C, you need both humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity. So we try to use whether the VLP along with the DNA which codes for these protein can be punched together. So the VLP plus DNA vaccine, will that actually have a better efficacy? We have been trying this in mice. The initial results were good. And now we are actually doing in the pig. Why pig? It doesn't infect pig, but pig immune system is actually very close to human immune system. So we want to test it in pig, the toxicity, bioavailability, all these things also will be tested before it goes to preclinical trial. And then these experiments are actually on currently. Now, coming back to the RNA viruses, the different strategy they adopt are, we can take it as an armory of the RNA viruses. Could be reassortment, it could be genetic drift, it could be recombination. An increase in the rate of beneficial genetic variants and ended up with the new combinations from the existing mutants. Reassortment, you know what actually happens in case of the parent virus, but virus infecting the same cells, two different strains if it ends up, and then they exchange or they have a chimeric situation. So the progeny virus with the varying surface antigens are infecting a broad range of cells. So their organ tropism changes. Their species specificity can also changes because of the reassortment. There are already evidences in Bunia viruses, orthomyxovirus, arenavirus, reoviruses, and all. We are also familiar with the antigenic shift and the antigenic drift, particularly in the context of flu virus or even in dengue virus, which you heard from Naveen in the morning, that actually the antigenic drift is actually selected smaller number of mutations in the major surface antigen, which can have changes in the epitope or changes in the structure of the structural proteins, and that can actually affect the antigenicity of the virus. But antigenic shift is more dangerous because here in these cases, the changes are much more difficult to handle. Now, another way to look at it is the recombination. Recombination in the virus can happen in the context of an unsegmented genome or in a segmented RNA viruses, or even an RNA viruses like a retroviruses where there is a DNA intermediate. Now, in this case, what happens, the co-infection of the cell by two genetically distinct viral strains can end up template switching. And this, because of the template switching, you have a chimeric genome, and which can actually have a completely different property. And that ended up with a new host targets or actually have a new viral pathogenesis phenotypes. Now, retroviruses, it has been shown that even in HIV exhibits high rates of recombination. In this case, what happens actually because of the recombination, now you have completely different, because of the template switching at the provirus level, you have a different kind of a pathogenicity. And in the segmented RNA viruses, it's very common because the segments are interchanged, and then it becomes it's actually an examples of the flu viruses where the reassortment ended up making a completely new virus like an H1N1 becomes so dangerous, which we call swine flu, because in the pig it just happened in the for the reassortment. Now, what the cells or the host cells are doing, it's not that the host cells are sitting idle. There are viral sensors in the cell. Now, in a normal cell, you have a DNA located only in the nucleus or in the mitochondria. So for the DNA virus, it is easier for the recognition of the intercellular by the intercellular sensors. But for the RNA virus, which are actually predominantly cytoplasmic, they may not have the nuclear history. In that case, it is even difficult because cell has to evolve multiple pathways for sensing such cases of RNA viruses. Now, here there are list of examples like a RIG-I, which is actually a pathway where they can target different this, let's say, AU-rich 3' UTR or the RNase activity or the 5' double-stranded RNA that actually triggers a kinase activity which phosphorylates CIF2. Then MDA5, LGP2, CGAS or IF116. All these things are cells have made it, but at the simultaneously, the virus is continuously evolving and coming up with a new strategy to evade these immune responses. Now, one such examples are here, as you see, the interferon response pathway. Interferon is our actually primary alert. What happens, you all read earlier that the JAK-STAT pathway is triggered, and but it is now shown that the STAT alpha and STAT2, the phosphorylated STAT1, STAT2, this complex is actually interfered by hepatitis C virus 4 protein or dengue virus NS5 protein. Now, there is another pathway called protein kinase R, PKR pathway, because of the interferon response, which actually needs to dimerize. Now, NS5A of hepatitis C protein has been shown to bind to the subunits and prevent the dimerization. Now, if the PKR cannot dimerize, it cannot phosphorylate EIF2 alpha. Again, the protein synthesis or the surgical strike of that particular killing of that cells is not possible because the virus somehow escapes from the interferon responses. So there are, and not only that, it also alters the ISG expression, the interferon sensitivity gene expression. So the whole pathway does not really help the cells to overcome the viral infection. So virus also hijacks different host factors. You know, it's a typical virus infection situation. The virus enters, then uncoats, then delivers the nucleic acids, that if it is a positive strand RNA that translates and makes the proteins, and these proteins are actually made viral proteins. Those viral proteins are recruited in the virus replication assembly complex, and then little bit amount of negative strand RNA is produced, which is used for template for making more and more positive strand RNA virus. Now, these positive strand RNA viruses are packaged and left. Now, all these steps involve several RNA protein and protein-protein interaction. And lately, we know there are protein-lipid interactions, which are very, very important. And somehow, virus manipulates these in the favor of their survival within the host. Viral and the host proteins in the virus replication complex, an important and specific role of host factors in the RNA replication and the translation. There are unique factors for different viruses. It's not like a common factor that is being utilized by all the viruses, then life would have been easier. But every virus has actually have their specialized requirements, and they have come up with their different kind of strategy how they can actually manipulate or exploit the host in a better way. The host factors are thus the key determinant of the virus pathology and the evolution. I'll just highlight you a couple of points here. Now, poliovirus is known to infect human host, and it actually shuts down the protein synthesis. Now, poliovirus shuts down the protein synthesis by cleaving one of the initiation factor, which is kind of a father figure which holds all the initiation factor at the translation initiation complex. But the virus RNA is uncapped, and it has been shown that the poliovirus or its close cousin Coxsackie virus B3 or even hepatitis C virus, they are naturally uncapped. In these cases, actually viral RNA doesn't really depend on the cap-dependent translation. What it happens is actually the ribosome binds to an internal sequence closer to the initiator AUG. This is like an RNA scaffold which helps to attract the ribosome to bind on and then starts protein synthesis. Now, then what happens? The 40S binds, then 68 joins along with it, and the translation starts. So it is a unique mechanism. And in my lab in IASC, we have been working on it using hepatitis C virus as a model system. And we showed that in the hepatitis C RNA, for this internal ribosome entry site or internal recruitment of the ribosome is mediated by several host factors. These host factors are surprisingly are nuclear proteins. They come out to the cytoplasm under hijacking conditions and forced to work for the virus. And not only that, we showed there are microRNAs, and lately we have shown that the long non-coding RNAs also play different games. They have specific roles to have the symphony going on, to have this orchestra in place. And that's how the hepatitis C orchestrates their translation and replication in the host by binding different RNA-protein interactions in the infected host. And now the question is it possible, knowing this, to target the virus and prevent the viral replication? That we have been doing it, and we showed that it's a small RNA which is derived from the virus 5' UTR can bind to the ribosomal protein and prevents the ribosome interactions with the viral RNA and inhibits the protein synthesis. Now we are trying to make this as a stable derivative by morpholino or modified basis and trying to see whether that can be used as an antiviral. We also showed one host factor called human LA protein, which is actually found in the lupus disease, lupus erythematosus. It's an autoantigen, but it is having a role in the tRNA processing in the nucleus, but the infected cells, it comes out in the cytoplasm and then binds to the viral RNA and helps in the replication. We showed that this particular protein, if you use a peptide corresponding to the RNA binding domain, this peptide is as small as 7 amino acids long. It folds to a beta hairpin structure, binds to the viral RNA, prevents the actual protein, the full-length LA protein, to bind on and prevents any replication of the virus. We also showed that NS3 protease, which binds to the viral RNA, it's a viral protein that binds to the viral RNA and inhibits the viral protein synthesis and facilitates replication. And if you use a peptide corresponding to the RNA binding domain, you can achieve the viral RNA replication inhibition. And as I mentioned, that we also tried DLP, and we recently showed some natural compounds which is derived from homogenate and thiolanthasamurase, which can inhibit the viral replication. And all of them are being now tested in humanized mice to see whether we can have antiviral which is effective for hepatitis C, in addition to the inhibitor that are available in the NS3 protease inhibitor or the NS5B inhibitor, which have some other issues. So essentially, from protein synthesis translation, we ended up with a translational research and trying to see whether we can apply that knowledge and then get into something which is deliverable. Now, coming to the new challenge, as I said, that none of these lectures, articles, or news clippings cannot be without coronavirus these days. So I thought that last couple of slides, I will show you the coronaviruses just to introduce, because the next 3 speakers are going to talk about the coronaviruses. The coronaviruses, again, the proofreading activity is a challenge. RDRT is there. There are mutations, but there is a trade-off between the genome length and the mutation rates. Because of the longer genome, which is something like a 30 kb compared to a smaller genome for the coronaviruses, longer genome cannot have the higher mutation rate. But even then, the virus is actually making a havoc. And we have found that the virus actually somehow steals the endoplasmic reticulum-associated protein degradation pathway, or ERAD pathway. What happens in the ERAD pathway, the viral protein gets co-localized with the LC31, and that actually gives a wrong signal, and this vesicles somehow protects the virus replication complex, or the VRC, and that's how they can manipulate the host and actually survive with the host armor. Then SARS-CoV-2, the major problem, it does not have any active or adaptive immune response, because we never exposed to this virus before, this particular virus. And coronavirus is also known to shut down the interferon secretory pathway and thereby overcoming the innate immune response. All these problems, but on top, why this CoV2 is so important, you definitely are, as I told you in the beginning, now everybody knows more than actually the people who are working with the viruses because of the, thanks to media and WhatsApp University, you have all these informations at your hands. What happened is actually because of these mutations, sometimes you ended up with a receptor can also have a better affinity for a particular virus. And in that's the case, the accessory receptors which might aid more infectivity to the virus. Now, a lot of times the natural host, from the natural host, the virus goes to an intermediate host, and the intermediate host somehow it has mutations to have a better affinity for the receptors, and then it acquires more mutations, and finally it achieves the goal of a high affinity binding to a human receptors, and it can become a real potent threat to a whole human host. For the SARS, this is mostly because of this, the SEA2 receptor and the spike protein. I'm sure it will be highlighted in the next three talks, so I'm not going to talk too much on it. Just to show you, to give you a sneak preview, that this is important, and all these things actually leads to the origin of the mutation, and we try to see where this virus is actually originated from. Is it from the bat or from the pangolin? The data suggests that it might have an intermediate host, which is pangolin, and probably from bat it has come to pangolin to human, now human to human. But more importantly, looks like because of the accumulations of mutations, it might cross the species barrier. There are reports that it has infected 10 tigers, and there could be also infection in the cat, but more results are necessary. Now, what we are doing at the Institute, last two slides, is actually Professor Partha Majumdar and Nidhan Vishwas from our National Institute of Biomedical Genomics showed by analyzing 36 SARS-CoV-2 collected from 55 countries. That's actually A2A type, because there's a non-synonymous mutations, which is the D614G, that possibly eases the entry of the virus into the lung cells of the host. And a very recent study with Arindam Mitro, again from our NIBMG, with a huge gang, including collaborations from N. Srinivasan's lab at Indian Institute of Science, we showed that there are mutations in the SARS-CoV-2 which has implications in actually the spike protein interaction, or even the capsid protein's functions, or even the engine and the microRNA interactions, which might have contributions to the host susceptibility. And there is also, we have shown some RNA-dependent RNA polymerase mutations in the sequences that we have done. But all these studies were actually done unilaterally in a sporadic way in different centers. Now we have a whole genome sequencing for 1,000 such genome collected from all over India. The yellow spots are different parts of the country. We collected samples to try to find out the viral mutations, and then try to understand how it can be correlated with the susceptibility and predisposition, and can we really identify the chances of infection, relapses, or the protections from the recurrent viral infections. With this, I would like to stop. As you see that this is actually a coordinated study all over India, and then coordinated by our institute and National Institute of Biomedical Genomics. If it comes, actually, it will be really useful for all of you to understand better the biology about this particular virus and somehow correlate with the disease severity. So with this, I would like to especially thank Harsha Raheja, sitting in the Indian Institute of Science. She made all my slides. I just had to go through this and try to present before you. Now I would love to ask and answer any questions if you ask. Thank you.